Well, I've got a minute after, so I guess it's time to start. Is everybody doing all right with the drastic weather change that we're having? Is there any, James always asks me, is there anybody new we need to add to the sick list when he comes? Everybody doing pretty good? That's good news. Scott, would you pray us in before we start? Scott Hobson, would you?
Sure will.
Okay.
Right. Father God, thank you so much for being here this morning. Father, give us this morning today to be here and to be your children and to be a family and to study your word this morning, Father. I just pray that as we look from your word, we look for guidance and strength and that we'll might learn a better way to serve you and be stronger as your children and as your family, Father. Father, I pray that you will bless us and are able to be here and also be blessed those who are unable to make it for physical or other reasons. Father, just give them a measure of help. Next, watch out. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. I think we begin this morning with Zacchaeus. So, and most of the time, I can tell you we're going to be in Matthew. I believe it's 11 and 12, a lot of it. So I got a question for you before we start. When we get to Isaiah, you're going to say, well, Michael, what does that have to do with... No, I'm wrong. No, I'm not. Yeah, it is Zacchaeus. And we're going to be in Luke 19. Luke 19. We will be going to Matthew later on, but right now we're in Matthew. I want to see one hand in here somebody likes the IRS. One. I'm waiting. Anybody? Does anybody like the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service? Y'all correct me on this. Am I wrong? Wasn't he the IRS of this day? That's what I thought he was.
With the police support me.
Do what now?
With the police support me.
Exactly. They sent him out, didn't they? Before we start, can anybody tell me? I know our kids talk about him a lot. Can anybody tell me a description of him? Wee little man. I was waiting on it. I hadn't done any research. Just Scott, Sammy. Do we actually know how tall he was? He had to get up in a tree to see him. Description of him. Anyway, we're going to read 10 quick verses. Then Jesus, and I'm in the New King James. Then Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. And now behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. So there's probably one reason why he wasn't liked. So, and he sought to see who Jesus was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was of short stature. So he ran ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree. And a lot of people don't like sycamore trees. I like them. I think there's something about them. I just like them. But they get huge to see him. For he was going to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house. So he came and made haste and came down and received him joyfully. But when they saw it, they all complained and saying, he has gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner. Then Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, look, Lord, I give half of my goods to the poor. And if I have taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I restore fourfold. And then Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he who is also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and save that which is lost. Anybody want to make any observations to this? about Zacchaeus or how we can apply it to our everyday lives? One that anything. I just made an observation.
He seemed to be an honorable guy.
He did. If he was a shyster, oh, there's Jesus, and this guy's trying to do right. He was happy to see this guy. He wanted him to come home with him. He wanted him there. If he would have really been a nefarious is a fancy word for dishonest, okay? But most of you knew that, but I'm not trying to use, but that's just one that comes to mind. If he wanted to beat somebody out of something bad, you think he'd have been glad when he saw Jesus to take him home? If he had been hiding something that he had done wrong, do you think he would have been glad? This story teaches us a lot about false blame, in my opinion. We better watch, and I'm talking to Michael, I'm not talking about anybody in here. All the fingers are pointed at me. I'm looking in the mirror. You better watch. Well, now, I really think we as Christians need to be not so judgmental as these people already were of him. He was just doing like Dan said. He was sent out to do a job, and he said, if I do anything wrong, I'm going to give it back to you fourfold. If you work for a guy or you work with somebody on a project or on a job, you know, I think Zacchaeus, I think he was an honorable guy. So I think all this is doing is teaching us to be straight up. There's two sides to this coin, really. When you do something, give everybody your baker's dozen. I don't know how many times I've done this lately, and I think Zacchaeus did that. When I get in a hurry, I might have, and I don't carry a lot of cash. I really don't. But when I get in a hurry, I have a bad habit of giving people too much money. And I think people generally in the world are still, for the majority, are very honest people. Because I know at least in the last year, 3 instances, sir, you gave me too much here. And I thought I'd counted it out, or I got in a hurry, and they were honest people. So all in all, that's the whole moral of this story, is he was not. Yes.
We call him today a wee little man, but his stature of heart made him a taller man, a greater man.
That's true.
He had a really good heart.
Is it not oftentimes that we often take on a job that makes us a bad person because of the title of that job or what the responsibility we have? Sam, go ahead. Yes.
We see the opposite parts in both of them. I think this is kind of a visual. We can see the rich young ruler wasn't willing to give up his riches, wasn't willing to give up his wealth to follow Jesus. Zacchaeus is not a ruler. In fact, like you said, he's hated. He's a tax collector. So his heart is what the difference is in both of these instances.
Right. And there's several spins you could put on this story, and I don't want to beat it to death, and you bring up a very good point. Have you ever been sitting there and says, and I've had people, well, I want to tell you about those people that go to church up there with you, this and this, and you can't just, I'm not saying you got to let it go, but you've got to realize, which you've got to sit down, and James is really good, our elder here is really good about thinking about what he says a long time before he jumps on any kind of bandwagon, and I really appreciate that about him. You can't be quick to judge, and all these people were quick to judge on him. I'm sure there were other collectors out there that would beat you out of money, and they said, well, he's a tax collector, let's just hate him. So that's what, I think these gospels that we're teaching, they have a lesson in every bit of this. Any other comment on Zacchaeus before we move on to Luke 19, chapter 11?
You ever heard the expression, if you want everybody to like you, don't be a leader, be an ice cream salesman.
Exactly.
Leadership, you're going to have people that don't like you.
You are, and you can't, and another thing is, and this has been my mistake, I was sitting down at a warden's desk one time and telling him he says, Rainey, and this guy really did not care. I think he did, because I saw him act like a real idiot on some instances. But he said, don't you think there's some people here that don't like me at this institution? You know, woe is me, and I was having trouble doing this, and he was wanting me to take a bigger leadership role, and I didn't take it. Because, you know, they always say all money ain't good money. And I knew going in, and he said, you don't think there's people here that don't like me? And anyway, there again, you're right. Do y'all remember a Supreme Court Justice, Antoine Scalia? He died in 2016. He was going goose hunting or whatever it was, and he didn't come out of his hotel room. And they waited and waited, and his buddies are going, hey, man, y'all he's supposed to be in here. Something's wrong. Sure enough. At his funeral, a guy got up and said, a horrible, horrible, now think about this. A horrible, horrible man has no enemies. What does that mean? I mean, anybody got any comment on that? Is that a horrible, horrible man has no enemies? He had no scruples. And I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but that's what he said. And I think what he meant was people like that never stood up for what was right. So that's what he said. Okay, we're moving on to the nobleman's 10 pounds. I think this mimics the guy that had the 10 talents and one of them buried one in a jar, but we're going to study this anyway. Now, as they heard these things, he spoke another parable, because he was near Jerusalem and because they thought the kingdom of God would appear immediately. How many times have we discussed that? When James's, who was the other one? The two disciples that came to him. She wanted them to be kings here on this earth, and the disciples kept asking, well, who's going to be the king of this earthly kingdom? So anyway, therefore he said, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. So he called 10 of his servants and delivered to them 10 minas. A minas was 3 months' wages back then, is what I've got on that. I don't know. The other story had to narrow. This is a minas. And said to them, do business till I come, I guess till he comes back. But his citizens hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, we will not have this man to reign over us. So we got another kind of a Zacchaeus thing going on. And so it was that when he returned, having received the kingdom, he then commanded these servants to whom he had given the money to be called to him, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading or investing. Then came the first, saying, Master, your mina has earned me 10 minas. And he said to him, well done, good servant, because you were faithful in a very little, have authority over 10 cities. And the second came, saying, Master, your mina has earned me 5 minas. Likewise, he said to him, you also be over 5 cities. Then another came, saying, Master, here is your mina, which I kept put away in a handkerchief. For I have feared you, because you are an austere man. I guess that's the same thing as a hard man. I didn't look the meaning of austere up. And I've heard it before, but I really don't know the meaning of it. Somebody wants to Google that, they can tell us. You collect what you did not deposit, and reap what you did not sow. And he said to him, out of your mouth I will judge you, wicked servant. You knew that I was an austere man, collecting what I did not deposit, and reaping what I did not sow. Why then did you not put my money in the bank, that at my coming I might have collected it with interest? Let's see. Yeah, we're still reading on here. We got 3 more verses to go. And he said to those who stood by, take the mina from him and give it to him who has 10 minas. But they said to him, Master, he has 10 minas. For I say to you that to everyone who has will be given, and from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. bring here those enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, and slay them before me. Any comment? Any hint of what is he really talking about here? I've got an opinion on it.
Our gifts that we're blessed with.
Exactly. He wants us to bear fruit, does he not? Not just sit there and not grow is what I get out of it. Exactly right.
Another good point is, it doesn't matter that maybe somebody's more gifted than you are, you'll still get rewarded for what you have and how you use it.
That's the point of this story exactly. If we know we're not shy and we can go out there and meet people and do what we need to do, and we know that that's something it's going to be more pressure on us to really do it. Because if we don't do it because we just, man, I'd rather do this today or that today, then we all have talents. We got to use them. And if we got talents to see things and decipher things and interpret them, then for this Bible, and we're really good at that, we have to use that talent. Teaching, if it's a talent, then that's the whole point of what he's trying to say here. 134 says Jesus returns to the home of Mary and Martha. That would be, let's go to John chapter 11. It's right at the end of it in verse 55. The curriculum here is kind of different about that, but I believe that's where it leads us to. And the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went from the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. Somebody give me a hint. What are we talking about here? To purify themselves. Is that to make sacrifice for sin, would it be? Anybody? That's all I could think of. Purification what, Sam? Right. Exactly. Then they sought Jesus and spoke among themselves as they stood in the temple. What do you think that he will not come to the feast? And now both chief priests and the Pharisees had given a command that if anyone knew where he was, he should report it, that they might seize him. Okay, so are they looking for him here? Was there a lot of pressure? If you saw Jesus, to snitch, say where he was at? If they were looking for him that hard? I would think if they had information that you saw him and they were looking for him, there'd be a lot of pressure on you to give it up. Because we're fixing to get into a case here of Lazarus. And I mean, this just doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's as crazy as things are today, or maybe a little crazier. 12 verse 1 says, then 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, who had been dead. In some verses, they said he was already stinking, whom he had raised from the dead. There they made him a supper. Here we are with Martha and Mary, and Martha and Mary served. But Lazarus was one of those sitting at the table with him. This does not go on and talk about Mary, but I'm going to go off of this curriculum a little bit and go on to verse 3. Then Mary took a pound of very costly, and we've talked about this before, Kenneth, and I've heard you bring it up a million times. Costly oil of spikenard, and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. and the house was filled with the fragrance of oil. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who would betray him, said, "Why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" Any comment on that? Now, this is off the curriculum a little bit, but I thought it was important to bring it up.
We're worried about, we're not taken out of it.
That's why Jesus picked him, because he was so good with money. But it showed, yeah, he wasn't. Oh, no, we got to keep this.
Well, he was gonna steal it. Steal part of it.
Yeah, if he's breaching, find out that
Okay.
he liked it.
He wasn't like Zacchaeus, was he, Scott?
No, we not.
Okay.
He's a greedy man. Greedy.
Okay.
This is also a lot of money. A denarii was a day's pay, so this was almost, well, Jesus estimated 300 denarii, which would be almost a year's salary or a year's wage. So it was a pretty big chunk of money.
Right.
Again, it shows where his heart's at.
That's why I kept reading it. It wasn't, and I want to go on and tell what Jesus said about because I'm not going to be here much longer as we go on and talk about that. Okay, there's something, he's met Martha and Mary's and Lazarus sitting around the table after he'd risen him from the dead. So let's move on in this chapter to 9 and 11.
Hey, Mike,
Yes.
I don't know that this will matter, but you know, in the previous chapter you read, the Passover of the Jews was near and about purification.
Right.
And so I did a little quick jumping around here. There's a case in the book of Numbers where there were some men who had defiled themselves with a dead body. They had touched it.
Okay, right.
They couldn't partake of the Passover. So I'm wondering if the religious here, because Lazarus had been dead, Jesus was in association with the dead man. And so therefore Jesus would, they thought, would not be able to take the Passover, so they're finding fault.
There's a good point.
I don't know.
No, I think I want to go down another rabbit hole while you're here. Because religions take some from everything. And boy, Amy will laugh when I say this, but I got in trouble one time at work. I didn't get written up in it, and I think this day and time I probably would have. We had this thing called a call out, and they had Muslim. Friday is their day, right? This is it. This is their work. I don't know if y'all knew that or not, but that's when they go to Jummah. That is the grand poobah of big deal with them, I guess. And they always go in, and I had two that were bad nefarious about leaving my crew. And I was still in my late 20s. And I busted in that chapel, and they were there. But they did have an appointment to be there. So the chaplain said, "You get married, you got to go." But they always had this, they always washed and cleaned up and had a smell in the chapel. They purified themselves before I think they got this from the Bible, in my opinion. I don't think they got that from the Quran. I mean, purification. It is in the Quran? Okay, because I've never read one word of the Quran.
All parallels in the Quran.
Okay, and I'm not going to but they always, before they went to those Muslim service, they really cleaned up. And I'm going to forget where I am if I keep going on that subject. But anyway, we're in 9 and 11 of chapter 12. And this is the plot to kill Lazarus. Now a great many of the Jews knew that he was there, and they came, not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. But the chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death also, because on the account of him, many of the Jews went away and believed in Jesus. Okay, there it is. Now they're going to kill a man that's been raised from, he's already made it and got raised from the dead. And now they're going to try to kill him again. Now please correct me on this, we don't ever know if they killed him or not. There's not a place where they got him on this plot. to kill him over that.
They're trying to, as we call it, today's world, save face. You know, they've been upborn by Jesus. They can't do that. Actually, Pharisees can't raise a man, so, Jesus has raised this man. This man is preaching Jesus was,
I'm with you.
and, you know,
Poor old Lazarus couldn't help that Jesus raised him from the dead.
but they're, you know, today's world, they call it save face. You know, they're trying to save their face because they've been, up by Jesus. You know, and they're pretty upset about it.
I agree. It just didn't, any more comment on this? That- there wasn't no place for them to go but other just take out their anger, right? It didn't solve their problem that they had of they were losing face, like you said, in the evidence that Jesus was for real. It's awful early here. That is the end of part 2 with Lazarus. We're going to go into part 3.
One thing I wanted to mention, talking about Mary putting the oil on Jesus' feet. And when I was in Saudi, I got an ounce of pure oil. It is, I got frankincense and I got myrrh, and then I got another. But I've still got a bottle of it, and I'm telling you, one drop will go throughout the house.
That's something I smelled that they had.
Yes, that's what the Saudi.
Excuse me.
Now, to give you an example, if you hate to take your time, if you take that oil and you cut it, I think it's about, put 10 parts deodorized alcohol, denatured alcohol with that, you have perfume. And I think it's 1 in 25, the number 25 parts alcohol, and only 1 part of that makes cologne. That's how strong that one drop is. I've got a bottle of it. I can bring it. It's very interesting.
And what did you call that?
This pure oil. I mean, frankincense and myrrh. Well, frankincense, I got frankincense and David oil, I think is what I got. But they're pure oil, and it's so strong you cannot, you almost can't wear it. You can't touch it. I don't know how to explain it. It's so strong. But it smells good. It's over the top in flavor. But yeah, that's what the Middle Eastern people eat.
Any other comment before we move on into Matthew 21? And this is Jesus' triumphal entry. Things are ratcheting up because he's really going to tell them who he is. There's a lot to be discussed on these next 11 verses. And a lot of it I don't understand. Maybe y'all can help me with it. But we're going to start in verse 1. Now when they drew near to Jerusalem and came to Bethpage at the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples. I'm going to stop right there. Did y'all know there was a town in Pennsylvania named Bethpage? That's, I thought that was rather interesting. Over here, there's a Bethpage. I just didn't know if there's any kind of history around that or anything, but there is one. Saying to them, go into the village opposite you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Loose them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, this is Jesus talking, you shall say, the Lord has need of them, and immediately he will send them. All of this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, tell the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, lowly, and sitting on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. So the disciples went and did as Jesus commanded them. And they brought the donkey and the colt, and laid their clothes on them, and set him on them. And a very great multitude spread their clothes on the road. Others cut down the branches from the trees and spread them on the road. Then the multitudes who went before and those who followed cried out, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And when he had come into Jerusalem, all the city was moved, saying, Who is this? So the multitude said, This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee. Any comment on that?
It's a miracle.
A miracle?
Yeah. Because in Mark and Luke's account, that's a donkey that ain't never been rode.
Oh, you're right. I've got Mark and Luke and I hadn't read that, so maybe we need to.
You can ask our horse folks.
Our what?
A miracle.
So that is a miracle. Okay, that's never been rode and he just let him ride him. I want to read what I've studied and got out of this. And then we'll go. I wasn't going to read Mark and Luke's account of that, but we're going to now since you said that. The triumphal entry in Jerusalem is a Christian event that describes Jesus' arrival in Jerusalem on a donkey before his crucifixion. It is celebrated, okay, here's where we're going to go down a rabbit hole, I guess, on Palm Sunday. That would be that's in the Catholic religion. They said, okay. I have been to a Catholic service, and it was at a beautiful church in Hot Springs on a hill in the town on Palm Sunday. So, does anybody want to elaborate really what Palm Sunday is celebrating? The same, they were laying the branches. Because I went to this service not on a Sunday, it was on a Saturday night. Jesus entered into Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. He was greeted by crowds waving palm branches and laying cloaks on the ground. The crowd shouted, Hosanna, which means save us. Jesus was praised as a Messiah. Where is it described in the Bible? It's just what we got through reading and what it symbolizes. The triumphal entry is a symbol of Jesus' kingship and messiahship. It is foreshadowed by Jesus' sacrifice for humanity, his crucifixion and his resurrection. It's more about being a servant instead of a king, is what I'm getting out of it always. He came to seek and save the lost and serve us.
Jewish people saw him as an earthly king, we gotta remember that. So he was triumphal entry into Jerusalem, they had a vision of him taking over the government. So this was, they were kind of like a red carpet, that's just kind of like this. But they saw him coming in and it was, even the 12 apostles thought he was had an earthly kingdom. That's what the Jews was vision.
So are you trying to tell me that this transpired from the earthly to the heavenly in this case? Okay, and I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm trying to ask you, so maybe I'll know. That's.
You just gotta understand the perception of what the Jews would believe, what they thought. Jesus kept telling them, no, I'm not of this world, but they would see him as the king of the Jews. He's going to take over the palace, and we're going to be a Jewish kingdom now. That's what they're saying.
Let's read Mark 1 through 11 before we go on. This is just, I'm not going to read all the accounts as we go through this, but I'm going to give Mark's account of this instead of Matthew's. And when they came nigh to Jerusalem, unto Bethpage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, he sendeth forth two of his disciples and saith to him, Go your way into the village over against you as soon as ye entered into it. Now I'm reading from the King James. Ye shall find a colt tied, whereon never man sat. There you go. Okay, Jay. Loose him and bring him. And if man say unto you, Why do you do this? Say ye that the Lord hath need of him, and straightway he will send him hither. And they went their way and founded the colt and tied by the door without in a place where two ways met. And they loosed him. And certain of them that stood there said unto him, What do ye loosen the colt? And they said unto them, even as Jesus had commanded, and they let them go. And they brought the colt to Jesus, and cast their garments on him, and they sat up on him. Okay, so that explains that. I'm not going to go on any further to 11. So he did that, and we learn a little bit out of every one of them. I focused on that.
Well, one significance is that in that time, if a king entered the city on a horse, he was coming to conquer.
There you go. There's,
If you
yes.
entered the donkey, you were coming in peace.
That's, yes.
It was significant because the donkey was a more humble animal.
That was humility.
If he'd have gone and got himself a stallion, it'd have been a whole nother vision for him.
You're great point. Great point. And I saw that in my studies, and I meant to bring that up when I was looking at it in that reading, and I forgot to bring. He was coming with a sign of humility, not a sign of force and to take over anything. Exactly. He came in peace, right? And he came to seek and save that which was lost, basically. Any other comment? We're going to move on to the fig tree. It's a short reading. There is a lot. I looked this up. There's a lot of instances with the fig tree in the Bible, a bunch of them. Now, in the morning, as he returned into the city, he hungered. And when he saw a fig tree in the way, he came to it and found nothing therein but leaves only. And he said to it, Let no fruit grow on thee henceforth forever. And presently the fig tree withered away. And when the disciples saw it, they marveled, saying, How soon is the fig tree withered away? Any comment on that? Jesus and the fig tree. And I had a commentary on it. I don't. Okay, Jesus curses the fig tree because in it he was found only the appearance of fruitlessness, many leaves. Let this be a lesson. Jesus, okay, well, I went back on that. I'm sorry. Okay, Jesus said to them, if they only had faith, they would be able to wither the fig tree, if they truly understood that he was the Messiah. Was he complaining here about the fig tree not bearing any fruit? Comparing to us? Any comments on that one?
I think he went to the fig tree because a fig tree should have fruit.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the reason they had them. That was the purpose of them. And if somebody comes to us, we have the outer presence of being a Christian. Somebody comes to us, we should have the fruit to feed them. And if not, then we're no good ourselves.
It kind of goes back to those other parables, don't it? Here's another. Jesus says to them in 21 and 22, the one we read, Jesus said to them that if only they had faith, they would be able to wither the fig tree if they truly understood that he was the Messiah and they were his disciples. I keep getting something coming up on that to try to interfere with. They would be able to do miracles like cursing the fig tree and casting mountains in the sea. They just need to pray to have faith that is eyes to see the truth. So I think that's exactly what he's mentioning there. So next week, we're going to move on with Matthew 21, and we're going to talk about Jesus cleanses the temple. That's quite an instance if y'all want to be going forward and studying on that subject. That's what we'll be discussing. Jesus cleanses the temple. So we'll start there in Matthew 21. Any comments? Been a great class. Thank you.